I went to go to the NEDA website,
Mhm.
National Eating Disorders Association, and I just typed in NEDA.org, and it's the New England Dressage Association,
Oh,
or dressage, I should say.
dressage.
Dressage.
Gotcha. I thought it
That
was
is
something a little
not
more
what-
scandalous.
Nope, that is not exactly what
I went to
looking
type
for is
in
dressage.
nita.com and it's penis.com. Where am I
I
at?
know. Hello, and welcome to Middleish, the podcast about moderation in all things. I am Erin Green.
And I am Michael Gray.
Hi, Michael Gray.
Hello, Aaron Green.
Hello, and good morning if you were here in Boise,
Good
but
morrow.
I guess for you, good morrow. We
Yeah,
should try and do, I just think when you said that, I just picture like some, I don't know if it would be Irish or Scottish, like some accent
I don't know.
saying that, good morrow.
Maybe
But-
English. Like, oh, I know what we could do. You could dress up in like one of those big poofy like dresses, right? With the, what they call those things that had underneath
Bustle?
yes. So you can't even sit down, right? I'll be like all dressed up with the top hat and we'll just do English accents the whole time.
Okay.
Yeah, and we'll talk
Let's-
about health things like how you need, cocaine to lose weight, or like what was from like the 1800s.
The worms, didn't they eat
Yeah.
like they fed tapeworms to people?
Yeah, how your biggest problem as a woman is you're just hysterical.
Or like those belts, those like vibrating jiggle
Right.
belts or whatever that are supposed to burn the fat off your body.
Yeah,
Yeah. We should take a listener poll. How would you like that for us to go through the old English methods of weight loss and fitness?
Middleish in the
In
1800s.
Middleish century. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll do something like
Yeah.
that. Oh
All
boy.
right. Enough of that. Things are good there.
Well, yeah,
good? Yeah.
we're good. We're finally feeling like there's some spring and there's trees are filling out, and it snowed last week and it hasn't snowed in like 6 days. I think we're doing pretty good.
Okay. Good. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
It probably snowed and
End
then it was
of
like
April.
80 degrees
Yeah.
the next day.
Yep, pretty much. That's
Yeah.
Idaho.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yes.
Well,
I actually went to Tucson recently to visit some friends, and I just have to tell you that we were having conversations around just nutrition and whatever, exercise and just different things. And I said something, they asked me a question, and I said something like, well, I don't think either extreme is the right way to look at that. I really think somewhere in the middle, like I take a pretty moderate approach to things. I really try to
Yeah.
see like both sides and then find a way in the middle that works for you. And I said, that's probably why I have a podcast called Middleish. And
Yeah.
she stops and she goes, oh my gosh, I hadn't realized that totally makes sense that's
Yeah.
the name of your podcast. Like she just hadn't, she like, it gets kind of a weird made up word.
Interesting. I
And
bet
I
that
was like-
happens more than you think. People hear the
Yeah.
name, it's just like, okay, whatever, just accept
Middleish.
it, and no,
Yeah.
no thought as to why. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we do say
Yeah.
a podcast about moderation and all things.
I know. And if you've been listening to us from the beginning, which so many of you have, thank
Mhm.
you. Thank you, listeners.
Thank you to our
Um,
ride or dies out there.
Yeah. If you've been listening to us from the beginning, I think that it would make sense that we really try and aim for like middle ground on a lot of the topics we address.
Yep.
So
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And we had we knew before we had the name, we knew that was where we wanted to be, is like, what's the space between the extremes? And there's a lot of it, right? And let's explore where health lies without like reverting to like just such extreme measures and extreme beliefs and thoughts and that kind of stuff. And we had several. Do you remember what was it? The Mod Pod? I liked
yeah.
that one a lot. And some optometrist in
eye
Kansas
doctor.
or something
yeah.
like had it. I'm like, what the hell are you doing with Mod Pod? That doesn't make sense.
You stealer of the good
You
ideas.
son of a bitch.
I like Middleish. I'm really glad that we landed on this name. And I
yeah.
think
I'm really
Yeah,
happy
it's
with
good.
it. Yep. Speaking of which,
Yeah.
shall we dive into Middleish?
let's talk about our Middleish topic today.
Our Middleish topic today.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
This really came up, I mean, we are going to be talking about something very extreme today. And I just want to preface this with, we are going to be talking about eating disorders and some specifics about that. So if this is something that you don't, if you're listening and you're like, oh gosh, I don't know if I'm ready to hear this or dive in, now is your time to maybe, do what you need to do and take care of yourself in that realm. If you don't want to talk about this stuff, we're not going to get super detailed or graphic or anything, but just want to give you all a heads up.
Yeah, it could be triggering for some people.
It can be.
Now, if you heard that this episode's about eating disorders and like, not for me, hold on, because we're talking about eating disorders for sure. We're also talking about disordered eating, which seems like we just flipped the words around to sound cool. But we didn't do it, so it's not us. But here's the thing about disordered eating is that there's a really good chance, like 100% chance, that you have some disordered eating behaviors. I think we all do, or at least beliefs, or at the very, very least, like residual effects of beliefs we used to have, even though we've been building other ones. Like I have spent the good portion of the last 3 years, like really working just internally, like where has like the impact of diet culture like taken root in my life, and where does it still hold places? And even though I've like done a lot of dedicated work to try to break free from a lot of like the beliefs and that kind of stuff that it imposes, they're still there. I still find myself going like, I'm getting a little soft around my middle. Maybe I should cut out some carbs. Maybe, like there's still these things that just come in and because they've been there since birth. Right. And so I think, even if you don't like, if eating disorders isn't something that's of interest to you at all, great, that's fine. That's not going to be the entire podcast by any means. It's going to be a portion of it. But we're also going to talk about some behaviors and beliefs that almost every single one of us engage in to some degree that can be incredibly harmful and hurtful and can be doing a lot more damage than you realize. So if you heard eating disorders and you're like, maybe not this one, stick around, because I think this is probably going to be one of the most important podcasts we've done in quite a while. So yeah.
Thank you for that. And that's a perfect intro. And the reason this kind of came about is, I just put on this meeting for the Idaho Dietetics population. So we have this annual meeting, and because I work in the area of disordered eating, body image, all those things, I was like, well, I'm going to bring in some speakers to talk about this, because I feel very strongly that everyone should have at least a basic understanding and some awareness around disordered eating. Of course, Michael and I work in the fitness and nutrition space, and so we might encounter it more often, but I guarantee every one of you is going to bump into a conversation or a person or a relationship or even your own point in life where it becomes a thing. It becomes something to be aware of and to think about and to talk about.
Sure.
I always like to say that eating disorders love privacy and silence. And so in my opinion, the more we talk about this and raise awareness around it and present it in a very matter of fact kind of way, this exists. It's extremely harmful. Disordered eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness. When I tell people that, it's shocking to hear, because they're like, well, what about depression and people commit suicide and, because of these things? Or, well, eating disorders, I mean, really do have a high prevalence of mortality, death, permanent damage to the organs. And I think it's really important to distinguish that it's not just, it manifests as a physical illness, but it is actually a psychological disorder, which is why just feeding the person or just putting food in front of them or just telling the person to eat does not work. There has to be a multi-pronged approach to treatment. So we'll talk about all of those aspects. But, man, I did my master's research in this area. I helped guide undergrad classes as a grad student in this area. I've done a ton of reading around it. I've done a ton of work with individuals with it. And I still find myself learning about the intricacies of eating disorders, basically something new every week. And this presentation we had at the meeting this a couple weeks ago was really done by an excellent speaker. She's a local dietitian here in Boise that works in eating disorders. Her name is Danielle Rhodes. She did a fabulous job. And just having that understanding in the room of all of us dietitians hearing the same message of like, this is what to look for. Here's what it is. These are the definitions. These are the diagnoses, was extremely helpful. So
awesome. So what if we start there just with your experience and expertise? Can you just tell us, just so we're all like on the same footing to start, what is disordered eating? What is an eating disorder? How are they similar? How do they differ?
Yeah. So I think you definitely touched on that when you said like all of us probably have some kind of disordered belief system around food or practice around food at some point in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the distinction here is that disordered eating is basically practicing something that is not considered normative non-disordered eating practices. So that's when, like, just to define, like, what is normal eating? And I don't really like that term normal, because then the opposite is abnormal. And then we know where that leads. So stigma, and we don't need that. Yeah. So basically, like, what is non-disordered eating? When someone mindfully consumes food when hungry, they're able to stop when full, they incorporate a variety into their diet, they don't have any specific rules around food. They feel very comfortable in social settings or when there's external influences on how they eat. Most of these people also have very good coping mechanisms with emotions and, any beliefs they have around food that may try and interfere. They feel very confident in their ability to navigate those. So that's non-disordered eating. If you've been listening to us for a while, you probably noticed that is a lot of what we talk about in encouraging people to really get that foundation of eating. Now, disordered eating starts kind of playing around with that normative description I just provided. So instead of including a variety of foods, there are very specific foods that are okay or not okay to eat. So we start getting some black and white thinking. We start getting some rules around food. Eating might become very rigid, and it might often be tied to our self belief on if we're doing things right or wrong, if we are good or bad. Those kinds of things start getting into disordered belief systems around food and ourselves. Yep, absolutely. People who are maybe feeling like they're unable to stop eating in the presence of a highly palatable food, or maybe a forbidden food, or like, this is why I really dislike cheat meals or cheat weekends, because that to me, it's sliding into that disordered eating space where, because you let go of the reins for this meal or this weekend, all of a sudden that creates in your mind, it creates the opportunity to eat as much as you want, which isn't tuning into what your body really is telling you, and really trusting, building that trust around food. So disordered eating, I mean, I'm hoping I'm painting a good picture with some examples of what this might lead to. I think another way to look at it is this feeling of an inability to remain calm and confident in food situations. Like, food ends up running your life and driving your decisions in a way that isn't necessarily pathological yet, and we'll kind of talk about how that creates then the diagnosis of an eating disorder. But it's things like oh gosh, I don't know, I'm drawing a blank. It's things like avoiding going to your friend's wedding,
like
because
social events.
Because you're worried about how you're going to hit the buffet, or there's going to be cake and alcohol and I can't control myself around it.
Or because you can't bring your own meal.
Or disordered eating might look like, you portion out, maybe plan out and portion out your food for lunches for the week. You finish that portion one day and you're like, gosh, I'm still kind of hungry. But instead of eating, you go drink a big glass of water and you like head out for a walk, and that little brownie is nagging at you all day because you actually are still hungry, but you're disregarding what your body is telling you. So there's things like that's like a very gray area, because those things I just described are very common. Like, I mean, dietitians might even I know that I've encouraged people like, okay, just stop and go for a walk or whatever. But it really turns the corner when you have this very rigid look at how you should be eating, what is the portion size. And then if you break that rule, then you have this icky, guilt-laden and shameful kind of spiral that starts to happen. It may or may not be enough to shove you into a full-blown eating disorder. But for those of you listening, how many times have you maybe felt or related to some of the things I'm describing when you've tried to diet? Or you've tried, and that's a good point, is that a lot of the things we hear from the dieting world and diet culture is disordered. That's the fact of it.
That's one thing that, just to interrupt real quick, blew my mind when I started learning about disorder, because I knew about eating disorders my whole life, you hear of them, but disordered eating was something that came into my field of understanding a few years ago. And what blew me away is that you go through the list of like, hey, here are some qualifications for what disordered eating looks like. And you read through them, and it's everything diet culture tells you to do to be a quote unquote healthier person. Everything, restriction and counting and white knuckling it and making up like, you had a brownie, so now you got to restrict calories the next day or work extra hard in the gym to make up for it. I mean, it's everything that diet culture goes, here's what you're supposed to do. And it's all backwards and only screws you up. It's wild.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And I think it's sad that we normalize that kind of thought and behavior process around food. Now,
it's like disordered eating is the way that we think we're supposed to do it.
Yeah. Now, I do want to defend attention to health, attention to eating things that are right for you, or making choices like, okay, I know I'm going to go out for, a pub dinner tonight, and so maybe I'll make sure I get my veggies at lunch. Like, that kind of stuff is paying attention to health and making decisions that work for you. When it starts becoming disordered is when it interferes with your enjoyment of life, it causes anxiety around food, and you start obsessing around what you're going to eat, where you're going to get the food. The plan has to be the plan, and it starts going down the spectrum of rigidity. So I don't want to pass judgment on anybody who is taking good care of their body and their health, and they feel like, man, I do some of these things, but it works for me. Like, it feels really good. I'm not missing out on life. I feel, that's okay. I mean, we all have different ways of eating and living and existing in our bodies. So you do what works well for you. Pay attention to the things that don't work well for you, and don't try to convince yourself that it's working just because diet culture says that this is the way you should be eating. That's, I think it's a tough distinction to make, and if you have questions, like, I'm happy if you DM us through Middleish or something. I'm happy to try and describe this. And just to say, this is informational only. If you are concerned about some of your thoughts and behaviors around food and you're kind of questioning this, hire a professional who is experienced in eating disorders, a dietitian, a therapist. Talk to your doctor who is aware of this stuff, to get another perspective. That's my thought.
And just to kind of tack this on there, I saw a study, it's done in 2008. So my hope is that it's a little better now, because I do think there's louder and more voices in this space that are talking about bringing awareness to this and really, rallying against diet culture and these beliefs. So my hope is that it's lower. But in 2008, not that long ago, and it's probably close to this, 75% of women said they have engaged in disordered eating behaviors. That's almost all of us. And I would say there's probably a good portion of that 25% that said nope, that either isn't being honest with themselves or doesn't realize what they're doing. Like, I would say it's probably even higher. I'm pulling that on my ass. I might be wrong, but it just sure seems like it, because these are the foundational like behaviors that we believe are necessary for just being a healthier person as a society. Like, if you ask anybody, like, is restricting calories a good thing? Most people are going to say yes. If you eat too much one day, should you restrict? Most people are going to say yes. Most people, right? Because we just believe these things. So it's an overwhelming majority of people. I don't know what the percentages of men. I doubt it's much different, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's just that this was done through Self Magazine, a woman's magazine. So, but I mean, an overwhelming majority of people are in some way attached to these beliefs, stuck with these beliefs, wrestling with these ideas and actions. And it's really, really prevalent. I mean, like we said, we'll probably say this again, like disordered eating is literally the path that we're told to take to be a healthier person.
Yeah. It's really disheartening, I think, when you see and hear some of those statistics of how prevalent it is and just how normalized disordered eating has become in our society. And I feel like I'm constantly fighting against, the messaging, the talk, the just off the cuff comments of, well, now that you're retired, you can eat whatever you want. And I'm like, I ate whatever I wanted anyway. I mean, I paid attention to fueling my body appropriately, but I had played around as a new pro with, and I think I've shared this on the podcast before, with like, okay, if I could be perfect with my eating, if I could fit my body into this little box that looks like all the other pros, and if I could like force my way to look the part and to really, I have to eat like a pro now. That did not work for me. And thank God that I have enough training and awareness to recognize right away, like, this is not working. I think it's harder for the general population to do that because we just see it as normal. Like, everybody talks about how to lose weight all the time. It's in magazines, it's on TV, it's on social media, everywhere.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the time.
So, a couple other things just on distinguishing. So we talked about like non-disordered eating, we talked about disordered eating, and now we're getting into like what constitutes a diagnosable eating disorder. So I'm on the National Eating Disorders website. This is neda.org. And I will link this in the show notes. So we have some resources for you all. But this article is just saying people who struggle with eating disorders generally engage in multiple behaviors. It's not just like, oh, I'm doing low carb. It's like multiple behaviors around food control, a lot related around body image and mood as well. So she talks about the quantity of behaviors may be an indication. For instance, this person engages in behaviors multiple times a week or even per day. So this might be like in the case of bulimia nervosa, this might be purging multiple times a day. And purging could be in the form of vomiting. It could be in the form of exercise. It could be in the form of laxatives. There's lots of different ways to engage in behaviors that constitute bulimia nervosa, but it would be like a regular, like daily or weekly occurrence. There's a level of obsession around an eating disorder. And a lot of people, in treatment, there's a lot of talk around like the eating disorder almost takes on its own voice and its own presence as part of your identity. Which to me it's a really fascinating way to look at this, but I think it can also be really helpful for the individual who has been diagnosed with an eating disorder, because it can feel like you're not even in control of your own body, your own thoughts, your own behaviors. And if we can, I say we, as in I work with teams of people, therapists that are trained to do this and doctors that can help with this process. But if we as a team can start separating out, well, what is your healthy voice or your Aaron voice telling you versus what is your disordered eating voice or your eating voice, or just naming it. Some people come up with names. Like there's a book called Life Without Ed. So this woman basically named her eating disorder, ED, Ed, And she talks about like separating out this part of her identity. It's really, again, it's very fascinating, but I hope this illustrates how this is a psychological manifestation. It becomes part of this person's identity, belief system around themselves. And there's diagnostic criteria for eating disorders. So when somebody just kind of in passing says like, oh, I have an eating disorder, well, there's specific diagnostic criteria that need to be met in order to actually receive that diagnosis. Unfortunately, a lot of eating disorders go misdiagnosed or undiagnosed entirely because they can overlap with other disorders like OCD or anxiety disorder, or drug abuse and things like that. And so we run into, and I mean, don't even get me started with the paucity of mental health help that we have in this country and in our healthcare system. It's just really unfortunate that we don't have enough practitioners that have their eyes open to look for this stuff and to screen properly for it. And that might see, and maybe somebody residing in a larger body and think they need to lose weight and tell them that when they are actually struggling with an eating disorder. That is, I think, one of the hardest tragedies in this whole diet mentality environment for me to reconcile with is somebody suffering. And because they don't look like what we in our mind think an anorexic or bulimic, person should look like, then we pigeonhole them into, oh, you need to lose weight. That's a really horrifying thought.
Well, what it does is it says to their eating disorder, right? This belief that really holds a large space in their life. And I like how you said it. It's like, that's the thing telling them how to live, right? It's that situation is a doctor telling them, hey, that eating disorder, keep listening to it. It's telling you the right things, right? It's like reinforcing that this thing that people call a sickness, it's just you doing really good work. Because obviously you need to lose more weight, right? That's the good and noble thing. It just echoes that. And it's terrifying. It's terrifying for people with eating disorders. It's terrifying for just people who are just trying to be healthier. But I had this happen to a client of mine within the last 6 months. Doesn't have an eating disorder. She absolutely has some disordered eating behaviors, right? Most of us do. And she went to a doctor's appointment for something completely unrelated to her body shape or size, right? It was just a check-in on getting some new medications, kind of where things were at, that kind of stuff. Didn't bring up her body, didn't bring up her physical health in that way, didn't mention it at all. And her doc goes, did you want to talk about anything for weight loss? Like she called, like she was in tears, right? She's like, I've been doing all this hard work about just like loving myself more and giving myself grace and just one foot in front of the other. And for me, I was like, fuck that doc. Like 1,000 times. Like, I don't care how smart that person is. This person's an idiot, and you need to not listen to that person's voice at all. In fact, we talked about, it's like, maybe it's time to find a new doc. Like there's no doctor who's so amazing that you need to put up with, like reinforcing these hurtful and harmful beliefs because they prescribe medications. So like, no one's worth that. No doc is worth that. No person, and we've talked about this before, like no person on social media is worth following if they reinforce hurtful and harmful things. That's just that you don't need any of that in your life. And it's really unfortunate. And it really goes to show how prevalent diet culture is. It is everywhere. It is everywhere. It is in your doctor's appointments when it's you and your doctor and no one has brought up weight or nutrition or anything. It exists there too. And it's really critical that we see how pervasive diet culture as a whole is, and that the way diet culture exists and plays out in our lives is through disordered eating, right?
Yeah.
It's through these things. I mean, I'm looking at this list here. One of the signs and symptoms of disordered eating may include feelings of guilt and shame associated with eating. Okay, is that just everyone?
Right.
Like, when was the last time you were dieting or trying to eat healthier and you had some feelings of guilt or shame around food, like all the time? Right? Like, oh, am I going to get this decision wrong? Am I going to eat too much? Should I eat 7 almonds or 9 almonds? I better weigh them to figure out. Like, it's it's so prevalent, and it is so incredibly destructive, and it exists everywhere. Like, we really have to be vigilant about this. Like, maybe this seems dramatic. Okay, I've got a little drama in me. That's fine. But listen, this is incredibly serious, because you are going to encounter disordered eating beliefs in your own life and other people's lives, and diet culture on a regular, all the time basis. It's everywhere. It is everywhere. And so we have to be really vigilant about, like, what am I going to like take in? What am I hearing that I'm, without even thinking about it, just like adopting? Oh, my friend lost 20 pounds and they said this, so maybe that's a good thing. Like, we've got to be vigilant about the stuff that we're just owning and accepting and letting into our own, reinforce our own current belief systems and patterns. Like, it's critical that we are just super vigilant about knocking this stuff back and building new, healthier belief systems and patterns in our lives.
And healthier talk and conversation, because like, how many people comment on people's bodies because of weight loss or something, and it's celebrated that this person has lost weight. We don't know how they did it necessarily, or what's going on behind the scenes. And so again, you're reinforcing whatever behavior got them there. And you're also sending the message that they're more desirable and more attractive now. And it's worth commenting and acknowledging now that your body is smaller. And so this is why I really, really struggle and people might think like, oh, Erin, because you work in eating disorders, you look through that lens all the time. And so you're probably a little hyper vigilant about this. Well, if I am, and I will actually I will die on that mountain, because I am telling you.
Good thing to be hyper vigilant about.
My work with athletes and through sports nutrition. So sports nutrition is like this fun, exciting, scientific, like, people love talking about sports nutrition. And I use that as an avenue to plug body positivity, good food relationship, all foods fit, flexible eating, all of these things that we're trying to fight against disordered eating. I use sports nutrition to plug all of those things, especially to young people. And I will tell you, I have never over dramatized my role in the nutrition world. Like, oh, I'm saving lives or anything. But I got an email last week from a mom thanking me for saving her daughter's life.
Yeah.
And that hit. I mean, it still is like, really? Because of the conversation that mom and daughter felt comfortable enough to have with me, and because of my knowledge in sports nutrition, that's what put me in front of that family and funneled that person into the help they needed. So yes, we can be passionate and we can be overzealous and we can, rail on diet culture all day long, because that's the reason to save people from sliding into that. And you never know who might slide into that behavior, that belief system. I mean, I have some statistics in front of me. You had mentioned with males, like, you didn't have a statistic on it. I have a 2007 study by the CDC found that up to 1/3 of all eating disorder sufferers are male.
That's
and
eating disorder. That's not disordered eating.
Yeah, these are diagnosed. Okay. And then in a 2015 study of the U.S. undergraduates found that transgender students were the group most likely to have been diagnosed with an eating disorder in the past year. And so we have these, belief systems that it's a rich white girl disease or something. And we need to, we really need to squelch that and start recognizing that marginalized communities. I have some statistics here on BIPOC communities and eating disorders. Black teenagers are 50% more likely than white teenagers to exhibit bulimic behaviors such as binge eating and purging. BIPOC individuals with eating disorders are half as likely to be diagnosed or to receive treatment. And that's because half as likely. And that's because we have kind of these stereotypes
of what it looks like.
What Yeah, what anorexia looks like, what disordered eating or eating disorders look like. And then I mean, people in larger bodies, less than 6% of the people with eating disorders are medically diagnosed as underweight. Less than 6% of those with eating disorders are medically diagnosed as underweight. And so we have 94% of the people living with an eating disorder are walking around in a quote normal weight body or larger bodies,
And they
not
don't look the
underweight.
part at all. That's
No.
why, that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah,
6%. Holy shit.
I know. So
Wow.
this is also why I really struggle with when people pigeonhole. So first of all, let's just not comment on people's bodies. Like, let's just stop doing that. I mean,
So
there are
many more interesting
cases.
things to talk about than the
No
size of
shit.
someone's like, what are you doing?
I
Like,
know.
shut up.
I
Who
know.
cares? Who
And
cares? Like,
and
what does the size of your body have anything to do with what makes you interesting? Nothing.
yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing. Nothing.
Yeah. There is a time and a place to have very open conversations with friends or with clients or whatever with body size.
Mhm.
I think the difference is we feel as a society like it is so okay to praise and comment on thinness, and it is so okay to blame people and judge them for being fat.
Yep.
And that is just not the reality we should be living in, or that's
Right.
not even the scientific reality. So let's just stop.
Yeah.
Stop doing that.
Yep. So
I
I want to, two things. Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Were you in the middle of?
I had one more statistic to
Okay.
share
Yeah, go,
here.
go.
So rates of body dissatisfaction were higher among transgender and non-binary youth, 90% compared to cisgender youth, which is 80%. So just again, the marginalized, underserved communities and the people around us in our lives that just have a lot of risk factors for a lot of other things already. And now they have higher risk for body dissatisfaction and disordered eating. Okay, go.
Great. Good news, right? Okay. So two things. One, because you brought up like before and after pictures, right? So like if you want to see this like disordered eating like played out right in front of you, go to whoever you saw post their before and after pictures recently, because you've probably seen one within the last week or two. Like you see them all the time on Facebook and Instagram and social media, right? Go to that post and just read the comments. Just read the comments and see how often almost all of them will be something to the effect of, I have no idea what you've done to get to where you are. I have no idea if it's been healthy or not, but keep doing it.
Yeah.
Whatever you did, good job. Like you are better off now. So here's all this reinforcement from peers and family and whoever of whatever you're doing. Doesn't matter what it is. Even if after every meal you're going to the toilet and throwing it up 100% of the time, if that's what you're doing, keep doing it because we are so proud of you. Great job. Wow. You're amazing. Like this is literally what happened. Like go read the comments. Go read comments of a before and after picture and see how much praise there is for, I don't care what you've done, keep doing it. Because obviously whatever you've done is worth this body that's smaller. It's worth it. It's worth it. And here's the thing, this is my second point that I wanted to bring up, and then I'll go back to you. But is that disordered eating, these things don't just affect our physical health. They absolutely affect our physical health, but they don't just affect our physical health. They reinforce beliefs about ourselves. Like they reinforce how we see ourselves and our worth and our value in the world and our place and what we deserve, whether it's love or respect. Like these things, they don't just like, make us unhealthy, like just physically. They like erode our mental and emotional health as well. Like they just corrupt it. And that's the thing is like, most people aren't going to like die from following some disordered eating behaviors, right? Like that's probably not going to lead to like a physical death. But I am being 100% serious when I say it can absolutely lead to mental and emotional death. Like it can lead people to places where they feel desperate and hopeless and completely invaluable, and they have no worth because they maybe need to, not that they need to, but people have told them they need to lose 20 or 30 pounds.
Right.
Like it will corrupt your sense of who you are as a person in the world and tell you you have less value, you have less of a voice, you deserve less love and respect and care because you don't look a certain way. And so that's, I mean, it's dangerous enough physically. It really is. It's dangerous enough physically, but it just doesn't stop there. And that's why it's like, this is so important, is because so many of us are engaging in these things on a regular basis that it literally tells us we're not worth much unless we look like this, we weigh this, we can wear this size. We don't have value, we don't have things to offer. We don't deserve all of these things that we absolutely deserve, regardless of what we look like, because we don't X, Y, and Z. And that, I mean, if you want to talk about any kind of thief, is anything stealing life, man, disordered eating, I think, is right at the top of the list, because it literally steals your ability to be content and happy with yourself just as you are. You have to earn your own love. Like, how batshit crazy is that?
Right.
I have to earn my own love by punishing myself enough to look a certain way. And then I can give myself love. Guess what? It never, ever, ever works, and it won't ever work.
Yeah. I can tell you from experience working with people who have done whatever they thought they needed to do to make their bodies smaller, and they don't achieve all of that magical self-worth, happiness, self-actualization.
Yeah.
And it's funny because we tend to consciously tell ourselves, that's not why I'm trying to lose weight. I want to fit into my pants and feel better and move better. Like, we have all of these very, I'm worried about my cholesterol. I'm worried about my blood sugars. We have all these very justifiable reasons for wanting to pursue a smaller body. And yet, usually those things that we're doing to pursue that smaller body are not actually doing a lot for our health, which I think is another big distinction when we go back to the very beginning, when we talked about non-disordered eating patterns. It really is like flexibility with food and, being calm around food and having it integrate into your life in a very like peaceful, non-anxiety ridden way. And oftentimes when people think they have to ratchet down and, start working on all of these other ways to make their body smaller, they end up slipping into these very unhealthy behaviors. And might I just point out that dieting is the number one predictor of weight gain. Let me say that again. Dieting is the number one predictor of weight gain. So that means when you first make that effort to make your body smaller and restrict and ratchet down, that is increasing the likelihood that you will gain weight.
Yeah.
This is the big lie that diet industry will tell you. And unfortunately, it's still like, even from a scientific standpoint with medical practitioners and with dietitians and, even my own, I think back to my own training and the things I've learned, I'm like, well, yeah, it's pretty fucked. It's, that we
really
sit
is.
here and say like, oh, count calories and do these things. There's a reason why people continue to return and say, man, I've tried this 10 times and I always regain the weight.
Yeah. Cause like you said, it's completely fucked. It is 100% back. It couldn't be more backwards. Like it is backwards as you can get. Like it.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting thing that we have so bought into these beliefs and these lies that we repeatedly like attempt them. It doesn't work out. And we go, oh, I just got to try it again.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Yeah.
Like, and it not just that it doesn't work out, but it just like, it doesn't work out. And like, we don't just like, oh, okay, that didn't work. It's like crash and burn. Like, of course I'm here again because this is who I am. I'm someone who can't follow through. I'm someone who obviously doesn't care enough about myself.
Oh, that sounds
who doesn't have
sounds a lot like guilt. Sounds a lot like guilt and shame.
Doesn't
you're talking
it?
about.
Doesn't it?
It's
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'm
weird.
a piece of shit because I had 3 cookies after dinner. Like it just,
Yeah.
it's so incredibly damaging and it falls apart. So that's the thing I love about it is like when you get a client who can like take a step back, like you've had enough conversation, they could step back just a little bit and they go, oh yeah, this is
Mm,
horrific. I see it
yeah.
now. Like you don't need much space from it because it's not hiding at all.
Yeah.
It's blatant. It's just tricked you into think like we all know it's there. We all know these things. We all try to do these things. It's not trying to be subtle. It's right out in the open. It's just telling you that it's the correct way. But when you get to step like a half a step back, I mean,
Yeah.
it becomes so blatant so fast. And I love
Yeah.
that moment with clients where they're like, oh my God, like this is what I've been doing. Like these are the
Yep.
things I've been reinforcing. It's like, yeah, it gets
Well,
ugly real fast.
one of my favorite exercises to do with clients sometimes when we're really working on that first step to reject the diet mentality, to like really question why we believe we should be dieting or actively trying to make our bodies smaller, because to your point, where people are rewarded by making their body smaller, they're also rewarded by attempting to make their body smaller. So if you're not,
Mhm.
I remember working with this client where she was kind of like, I don't think I need to lose weight, but I kind of have this feeling or this belief that I should be trying always. And I'm like, oh my God, like what, why? Like, where did that come from? So one of my favorite exercises is to have that person write down over the next week, write down every single comment or advertisement or social media post that you see or
Yeah.
hear or are witness to that sounds like it could be diet mentality, that sounds like it could be reinforcing that message that you should always be trying to restrict and lose weight and make your body smaller. And people come back and they're like, holy crap, like their minds are blown because
I bet it's a
it's
busy
so
week for them.
prolific. It's great, but it's really helpful
Uh-huh.
in identifying like where that messaging is coming from. And I don't want to leave today without kind of moving into what do we do about all this? Like
Right.
how can I, keep myself from sliding into disordered eating? How can I keep my kids from sliding into it? What are some different things we can do? Well, I think, we're definitely not going to solve the problem of eating disorders today on this podcast. This was more like, let's just get this topic out there and talk
Right.
about it so people have a better understanding. Um, I think the number one thing to think about is that eating disorders are not just a physical, like medical
Right.
dieting kind of thing. It requires psychological intervention.
Mhm.
And our country has a really hard time with mental health because you're weak and you're special if you need mental health um assistance, which is just BS.
Yeah. Ridiculous.
Let's just acknowledge that if there are some things going on in your life or your child's life that you are seeing like, oh man, I think this could be disordered eating kinds of things. I also will put a screening tool linked in our show notes so you can go to the website and take this validated screening tool. But therapy, counseling, and mental health intervention, I think, is the number one um, thing that people need to be looking for and aware of,
Yeah.
is finding somebody who can help you with the beliefs and the attitudes toward food. A
Mhm.
dietitian is super helpful, a medical professional, a doctor that's versed in eating
Mhm.
disorders is super helpful, but if I could pick one, get into a therapist
Yep.
because it is a psychological
100%.
manifestation.
Yeah. And then I think to just piggyback on that with disordered eating, like I don't think that requires the level of psychological intervention that Erin's talking about, but it involves some, right? And that just may be on your own, right? That
Yeah.
just may be being your own advocate. Maybe it's working with a dietitian or a coach or
Yeah.
just
Reading a
processing things with a
book or
friend, reading,
yeah.
yeah. Like there's going to have to be some addressing of what you believe and what you think, because what you believe and what you think is the reason things are playing out the way they're playing out. And so we have to address those things, right? It's like I think we said it on here before. It's like you can change what you eat and change how you move your body all you want, but like that stuff's not going to stick unless we figure out why those things haven't been there in the first place? Like why are healthy behaviors not existent? And maybe it's just we don't understand behaviors for what they are, right? I think most people would call these behaviors of disordered eating healthy and good to do, so there's a lot of that. But so I guess the biggest thing that I want to say is when we're looking at like changing our beliefs around our disordered eating beliefs, is I think the best first step and one of the biggest tools we have is just awareness of just knowing what's happening. Like Erin's talking about, like, go through 3 or 4 days or a week and just write down all the things. It's like, oh, this person talked about losing weight. This person's talking about calories. Like, just notice how prevalent it is. Notice what your own thoughts are. Because here's the thing is you can't do anything that's going to shift those beliefs or those thought patterns until you know what beliefs and thought patterns are there. And diet culture and disordered eating beliefs are really good at flying under the radar as far as for being exposed. Like they're everywhere and we know they're everywhere, but as far as being exposed, they do a good job of like flying under the radar. So we've got to really know, like, what do I believe? What do I believe about food? What is my relationship with? What do I believe about my body? What's my relationship with it? How do I speak to it? What are the things I think about it? Like that awareness, simply paying attention to what you're really feeling and experiencing in all the situations, when you're working out, when you're eating, when you're trying not to eat, when it's late in the evening, when you're laying there in bed, when you see yourself in the mirror, like all those things, just what am I experiencing is such a massively beneficial tool. And I don't think you can do any really good work on this until you do that. It's like ground zero, like it's got to happen. And then the thing about it is, like, once you start paying attention a little bit, it's easier to notice. Like once you see, oh, that and that, it just kind of everything starts falling out.
Then
like,
all of a sudden
it's everywhere. Okay.
You start seeing
I see all the things. Yeah.
Yes.
But we have to take the time to build that awareness, to understand what is actually happening, what is going on, and what we actually believe if we're going to get anywhere.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
All
right.
Okay. Well, I will be sure to link. I have a couple really great resources. I'll link in the show notes. I will be sure to link the screening tool that I mentioned in case you're worried about somebody you love, or you're worried about a child or something. You want to, sit down and go through these questions. I think it's really helpful sometimes just to bring it to the surface and say, like, hey, this is a real thing. I'm not just creating this in my mind that I'm worried about you.
Right.
And I hope that this kind of opens up y'all's eyes to some of the challenges that people are faced with in our food world every day. And it's really, I think it's unfair and it's unfortunate. And it really just pisses me off that it's,
me too,
painted as this is the way we should be eating and this is the right way to live. So, let's all just take a little commitment to rail against diet culture this week. That would make me happy.
This month.
Because this life.
This life, just this life, that's all. Yeah. But so for me, like that, this is our topic, right? We're talking about disordered eating and eating disorders. And I think we've got some really cool stuff planned. This is like a 5-week month. So we've got a mini podcast that we're going to be releasing in a few weeks. To dive into some more of this stuff. We've got our reels coming out on Instagram. Like, we're diving hard into this month. And I think we have some really good strategies and tools to help you begin to identify things and work your way out of them. So just pay attention this month. Okay. Follow us on Instagram, because that's where everything happens. If you know people who, you know people who need to hear this. You absolutely do. You probably know a lot of people who need to hear this, maybe including yourself. So share it. Invite them, say, hey, there's some really important stuff happening in this space over the next several weeks. Let's go through it together. Let's watch, let's listen, let's partake, and then discuss with each other. Let's be accountable to each other to work on our way out of these hurtful and harmful beliefs so we can live freer and healthier lives. I really think it's going to be worth it.
Yep.
So, all right.
Okay.
Meaning in the mundane.
Oh, meaning in the mundane.
That's my meaning in the mundane dance.
Yeah, your little dance. Why don't you go first and I'll think of mine.
You're making the big assumption that I'm ready. Well, you're right, because I am.
I could come up with something.
Could you?
Yeah.
5, 4, 3, 2.
So I was in Tucson last week, and I have been to Tucson numerous times for training camps. When I was a professional triathlete. And I feel like it's one of those places. I mean, I didn't do like some pros do training camps like all the time. I didn't get the privilege of doing very many. I only did a few, and the vast majority were in Tucson. And being down there now, I'm in a completely different place in my life in terms of fitness and just my goals and my focus when I'm down there. I was visiting friends, cooking for them, having a great time with their little baby. But I felt so alive just getting to go ride my bike, getting to go swim every day, just getting to be outside in the warmth and the sunshine and kind of have that I don't know, that embodiment of like celebrating fitness and exploration on my bike and just being down here. It just like brought all of that back to the surface in such a good way for me, like reminding myself like what it was like to be there and like be just digging into like my peak fitness and working really hard and doing all of these things that really brought a lot of confidence and fulfillment for me. And just getting like a taste of that this last week was really incredible, even though like I really didn't care like how fast I climbed this hill that I used to climb really fast, or like how many miles I get in a day, or how many yards I get in the pool. It was just that like repetitive, like kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but that I want to call it a grind, but it wasn't a grind. It was like that.
I
don't know. Anybody who's been in the fitness world and has, dabbled in doing those big training blocks and just how it feels to really celebrate. I think it's like a celebration of like, my body can still do this. My health is in a good place. I'm strong. I love doing this. Like having the love of going and doing the sport still is really important to me. So I think that's mine.
That's awesome. Like you have a whole different relationship with it, but the same love and affection and fondness, and it brings you the same joy. Yeah. That's fun. Nice.
That's great.
Well, mine was just this morning. So at 4 a.m, I'm dead asleep, right? So Kathleen and I's bedrooms downstairs, the girls' bedrooms are upstairs, right? And 4 a.m, I hear, Daddy. So I'm like, jump out of bed. I'm running upstairs. Like, what's going on? And Sophie, my youngest, is laying on the floor of the hallway. They're laying on the floor. I was like, what's going on? And she's like, my stomach hurts. Like she was in the bathroom, stomach's hurting, Okay. So I pick her up. We lay in her bed, little twin bed, right? I'm just going to sleep here the rest of the night. So we snuggle up and go to sleep. She gets up around, 6:30 and goes downstairs. And I'm like, all right, I got to get up in 15 minutes or so. So I'm just kind of laying there. And then my oldest daughter walks by Sophie's room to go to the bathroom and sees me in there. It's like, what's he doing in there? Right. So she walks in and I'm like, hey, Bonk, what's going on? She's like, what are you doing in here? And so I told her and she goes, can I lay with you? Like, yeah, come on in, so over the covers and she snuggles up and she's going to be 12 soon. So like snuggling is getting less and less and less. Right.
Yeah.
But she just like crawled into bed and just kind of snuggled up with me. And we talked a little bit and kind of dozed and talked a little bit and dozed. And for like 15 minutes. And it was like the best way to start a day. Because I don't get to hold her near as much as I used to. Like it's pretty rare. Like she lets me hug her and stuff, but like, we don't cuddle when we're sitting on the couch watching a movie like I do with my youngest. She's just kind of old. But to know that like, okay, there's part of her that still was like, I want my dad to hold me for a bit.
Oh,
it was the best. I told her, I was like, this is like the very best way to start the day.
Super
so it was
cute.
Pretty great. Yep. It was good.
I love that. Keep snuggling.
Yeah.
Lila. Don't get
all right. Don't stop snuggling me.
Don't stop snuggling.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for joining us. Yeah. We will
spread the word. Again. Like this is important. Spread this stuff. It's really important.
Yep.
So share, tag people, whatever you got to do.
Yep. All right. Have a good week.
Bye-bye.